me turn my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello, welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and it is Thursday, so that means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. Am I the only one who's absolutely just like fucking blown away? Like I feel like I snapped my finger and the week is already done. I know that's like not a very profound observation. That's like elevator small talk. But shit, man, I feel like I can't get, like, there's not enough time in the week, and maybe that's a good thing, that I'm that much going on, that I'm getting lost in so much that the time is just flying by. But Jesus, man, another Thursday, here we are. Anyway, yeah, I don't know why I've like having small talk with you here, but it's like January, for whatever reason, if I can just have a sidebar here, January, it feels like the longest year of your entire life. And then once like February hits, it's like, fuck, bro, it's about to be New Year's again. It feels like everything is just feels like it's moving so quickly and so slowly at the same time. I don't know how to explain that. Anyway, what are we talking about today? Thursday trends, right? Let's talk. I don't want to dunk on Elon Musk and Donald Trump, right? I've critiqued them enough, but I want to use some recent events, particularly one example, to showcase what I fear when you see people trying to operate this country like a corporation with no regard to anything other than the bottom line. And mistakes are made, and potentially what could be catastrophic mistakes could happen because of the ignorance and lack of planning around much of what we're seeing right now. So we'll talk about that. Trigger warning, a really horrendous story where you actually had a middle school girl take her own life after her classmates were continuously teasing and threatening to call ICE on her. Just, I don't know, one of those things that like stops you in your tracks, and, you know, a necessary thing to talk about, but obviously just a tragedy that should never happen. But once again, another real world example of why words and rhetoric matter. We'll talk about that. And on the positive side of things, because God knows we need it, we have to highlight somebody from the community, a politician who's actually out here putting her money where her mouth is, and standing up for Latinos and everything that's going on right now, and not backing down. So we will shout her out. But first and foremost, let's dive into nonsense, the BS, in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the
All right, so let's start first and foremost with Elon Musk and Donald Trump, the organization that they've created, better known as Doge, which has been making headlines, you know, all these last couple weeks with the layoffs and just destruction of particular branches of government or government organizations, right? Now, under the direction of Elon Musk, Doge and the Trump administration suddenly fired 300 of the 1,800 people working at the National Nuclear Security Agency in Washington, D.C. The firings were a part of hundreds of terminations sent to workers at the Department of Energy, the parent organization of the nuclear agency. It appears that Doge made the decision based purely on their status without actually knowing what the workers did. So, for clarification, because this entire article, you want to read the full thing, I'll include it in the show notes, but status meaning their status of employment, like full-time, part-time, contracted, whatever it might be. So essentially, they fired people who were on a temporary status, some sort of temporary contract. Again, not actually looking into what they were doing, but merely just looking at the fact that they were not a full-time employee. Now, the NNSA, this organization, has two primary missions, and many of those fired are part of the management team that was overseeing tens of thousands of highly skilled scientists, engineers, and technicians who build, maintain, and guard the U.S. arsenal of some 5,000 nuclear weapons. Other officials that were fired work on an equally vital mission of preventing the spread of nuclear weapons and materials. Now, outcries from experts, officials, and members of Congress about the risks to national security forced Trump officials to reverse course. They announced last Friday that they would now rehire the workers. The problem is that they don't know how to reach all of them. And even in this article, you had former employees being interviewed saying while they may take their job back, they will be seeking employment elsewhere. I mean, yeah, who wants to sort of work under these conditions? Now, this could be an easy dunk on how idiotic and just sort of erratic and short-sighted these plans are by Donald Trump and cronies like Elon Musk. And it is. And this is just one example. And it's one that potentially could have very extreme and scary ramifications. Like, if you or I were, like, given options, like, hey, you know, we're looking into the budget and we're thinking, like, all right, where should we start as far as budget cuts go? I probably wouldn't, like, focus my energy on the departments that are in charge of protecting nuclear weapons. I probably wouldn't focus or direct my energy to the parts of government and the organizations that are responsible for overseeing nuclear weapons and preventing nuclear attacks on this country. And actually globally preventing the spread of nuclear weapons and materials around the world. Like, that probably would be an organization that I would leave for last, you know, like if we got to the point that we're shaking the cushions, you know, looking for loose change in the couch, that would probably be the only time that I would actually look at this organization. Other than that, I'd probably say, hey, they seem to be doing a pretty good job and their work is very important. Let me leave these people be. And if I was to look there to do budget cuts, I probably would only do so after having done an extensive amount of research as to what each and every person's role is, and then come to some sort of intelligent determination based upon all of the information as to who is essential and who is a non-essential role there. But instead, this is another glaring example. It's the bull in a china shop mentality that Donald Trump has and those under him, that they sort of just run with these wild ideas, take action without giving it much thought, and then sort of are like, hey, you know what? Mistakes are going to be made. We'll clean them up after the fact. But again, when you're dealing with sensitive things like nuclear weapons and the organization responsible for guarding, maintaining, researching, protecting, you can't use this sort of methodology or this strategy of fucking, you know, foot on the gas, 100 miles an hour, no looking back, because it's too sensitive as to if you fuck up, the repercussions could literally mean death on a mass scale. I mean, same thing with the FAA. There's a reason why this is not the standard, you know, operating process of those in power. And to be fair, government does move far too slow. There's far too much red tape and bureaucracy. I do think we could adjust that. But the problem with people like Donald Trump is they lack the I'm just going to say patience. I'm not even going to go any deeper than that. They lack the patience and experience to understand that, because they're trying to operate from the place of a business owner. And not for nothing, if Twitter goes offline for a day, yeah, money's going to be lost, but lives aren't going to be put at risk. Right? If Trump's organization, fires a key person, yeah, maybe the hotels or the golf courses aren't going to run as smoothly. But again, not a direct impact or effect on people's lives or national security as a whole. And that's why this argument and this excitement that people have over, they're going to run it like a business. This country needs to be run like a business. No. On the financial side, sure. You want to create more job opportunities? You want to create more potential financial opportunities? Absolutely. You want to end actual waste and overspending? Sure. But the problem with these people, particularly in the modern capitalistic era, these are not people who became successful based upon having great business prowess in terms of product development and creative solutions. These are people who became successful because of their use of brute force and being immoral to the point that they didn't care who and what they had to step on in order to make their next dollar. That's how they found great success. And the dark reality that I think people are not facing is that corporations don't give a fuck about you. They view you as replaceable. And a government can't function that way. A government's this is the difference. Corporations are not really meant to serve anyone except for themselves. At the end of the day, they can bullshit and say how they love their customers and all this. It's self-serving, a corporation. A government, on the other hand, sole purpose, the reason it was created was to serve the people. The government works for the people. We pay for their salaries. The money they use in their budgets to do shit around this country comes from our salaries. They work for us. As much as they don't want to, or not even don't want to, as much as they don't operate in that manner, that is the truth. So them now operating from the form of a cold corporation means they do not take into consideration the individuals and what they might face as a result of the decisions of those in charge. A corporation doesn't give a fuck about the fact that they're laying off a father of 3 or a mother of 3. They don't give a fuck about the fact that this person was barely hanging on to begin with, but now they're going to lose their job and lose everything as a result. No, they care about their bottom line. You are a cog in the wheel, a number, a statistic. You represent the savings of X amount of dollars each quarter for their fucking already rich investors and CEOs and boards and shareholders. The country can't operate in that manner because the country, by design, is supposed to take care of those who are struggling. It's supposed to make the lives of its citizens better. That's not what a corporation does. Corporations don't actually give a fuck about if you enjoy your work or not. As long as you're getting shit done, that's all they care about. That's their bottom line. Most of them. And that's the problem with just blindly running this like a corporation. And again, these people are used to coming into companies, Elon Musk, same thing he did with X, gutting it, and doesn't give a fuck about if it loses efficiency because he's trying to save some money. Right? And that was the problem with X. They fired or forced out crucial employees that then affected their short-term operations. And again, the difference in this is we're not talking about Twitter or X, lagging. We're talking about nuclear weapons not having the safety and security that they should. That's scary shit. And that's why you can't just have people who are blind, fucking disgusting, immoral CEOs treating this like another company that they just bought that they're just trying to gut and resell. And this is just an incredibly scary reminder of how inept the powers that be are and how awful this strategy is. And again, it's like what I've touched on in the past, and I'll leave it at this. On the surface, these aren't particularly bad ideas in terms of the general idea of where can we cut out the waste. That's not a bad idea of, investigating and finding out, okay, what is sort of unnecessary? What can we redo? The problem is the execution and lack of forethought of how this is actually going to affect people's lives, of how it's going to actually affect the country. That's the problem. They're incapable of doing these things in a way where the American people don't feel it or don't have to have concern, because their skill set has been just being cold-hearted business moguls who don't give a shit about anything except for raising their profit margins. And again, that mentality has no place in the government, which is supposed to serve the people. Because what ends up happening with these corporations, and I'll really leave it at this. Who wins when a person like Elon Musk goes in there and guts a company, does mass layoffs and cutbacks and all these things, and now, the company was once in debt, now it's technically profitable because of all the money they're saving? Who reaps the benefits of that? Elon Musk, their board, and their shareholders. Right? The product suffers. The people who worked there suffer. And as a result, their consumers suffer because they're getting a inferior product as a result. Now apply that to the government and the country. Who benefits from what they're doing? It's going to be the rich people, the powers that be. Right? The person in charge, Donald Trump, is getting more and more loyalists that won't question anything he does. Elon Musk is becoming more and more powerful and putting himself in a position where he's going to benefit financially via his companies, who already are receiving billions of dollars in government contracts. He's going to receive benefits in a system that is scared to hold him accountable because of the power that he has. Therefore, his companies will be able to run wild and create more and more profits. And what happens? Who's affected by that? Well, the country, unfortunately, which again isn't a product that we can sort of stop using. This is where we live. And the people affected are us. Those who aren't exceptionally wealthy, who can, say, fuck it, I live in my own little bubble. This doesn't matter to me. Unfortunately, most of us can't do that. We are directly affected by things like inflation. We would be directly affected, God forbid, by some sort of terror attack. because we don't have real ways of escaping it like these people do. We, the consumers, or in this case, the citizens of the United States, would suffer from a lackluster product that, once again, those on top are benefiting far greater from. But we, the everyday person, are going to be the ones who suffer as a result, just as we do in corporate America when these sort of restructuring things happen. And again, there's far more at stake when you talk about our democracy than a company. And I'll leave it at that. I'll take a quick break here, and then we'll touch on this really tragic story. Again, trigger warning. This is going to be a difficult one, but we have to get to it. But first, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. All right, we're back, and this is one of those stories that, like, in my heart, I'm like, I don't want to talk about this, but it's necessary, right, for the context of all that's happening in this country right now, and I guess the world as a whole, in many ways. And again, it's not a got you moment, but it's just a reminder, like, of why we're so sort of passionate and why we're up in arms by rhetoric and words. And again, as sort of the example of the earlier conversation, those at the top are rarely affected by it. Those that have the platform that speak about it are rarely affected by it. But it's us, the everyday person, who's out in, the street living life every day, that's going to be affected by it. And unfortunately, in this case, it's the tragedy involving an 11-year-old girl. An 11-year-old girl from Texas committed suicide this week after being harassed by her classmates. Her name was Jocelyn Rojo Carranza. And she was the victim of bullying, with classmates threatening to call immigration and customs enforcement. They're saying, obviously, the suicide has devastated her family and community, and they're demanding answers from the school. She was in the 6th grade. And they're saying that her mother was unaware of the bullying that she was facing. They say that her classmates taunted her about being left alone if her parents were deported. In an interview with Univision, her mother said that her daughter had gone to the school officials on multiple occasions about the bullying. Despite calls for help, the school is accused of doing nothing to protect Jocelyn. Instead, Jocelyn met with the school counselor to help her, but no action was taken. Jocelyn spent a week in the hospital after attempting her suicide, and her family was hoping for a miracle. However, after a week in the emergency children's hospital, she passed away. Her parents are obviously demanding that this be investigated and the school's failure to protect her. Now, I'm not going to stay on this story too long because it's horrible. 11 years old, man. But it's so I don't know, I think people have a blissful ignorance to responsibility. And what I mean by that is, particularly in today's day and age, where a platform you can literally communicate with your followers in seconds and immediately, and you meet them exactly where they are, moment to moment. And anybody with some sort of a platform bears a great deal of responsibility for what you're putting out there. And when you begin to put rhetoric out there that targets people that targets people I'm trying to find the word. It's the best way I can put it. My mind is kind of like, you know, a little bit all over the place reading this. You guys know mental health is like a big deal to me. And you know, I've struggled with depression for as long as I can remember, and you hear like somebody as young as 11 taking this extreme of a step. It's just, I don't know. It hits close to home in many ways, but it's like almost unimaginable. And there's like a part of you that's like, you know, I don't know, wishes you could have done something. Which obviously is ridiculous. I don't, you know, I've never known this person or this girl or her family. But yeah, I don't know. It definitely, like when I hear about somebody succumbing to those dark thoughts in their head and just sort of giving up their will to push past it and fight, I can only imagine the pain that was going on in that person. And again, to think that an 11-year-old was going through that heavy of a time and bearing that much of a burden, and that this was having that much of an effect on them. And again, it's like, I mean, anything like this would be unnecessary, but like, it's so unnecessary. And it starts with like the parents of these other kids who the rhetoric gets passed down. And that's what's sort of frustrating. I mean, and again, it starts at the top. Then buckles down to the parents. But like at the top, this sort of gamification of people's lives, of human beings. The gamification of it all. These people, these communities that you're targeting, that you are putting misinformation out there, that you are painting as villains, as monsters, be it the Latin community, be it the LGBTQ plus community. These are real people living real lives with real emotions and people that love them and people that care about them. And you painting all of them with this broad brush and then doing everything you can to magnify and inflate this negative narrative to anybody that'll listen, and purposely try to tap into people's worst parts of themselves. That's what these politicians are doing. That's what Donald Trump is doing. They are strategically tapping into people's anger, people's fear, and they have blood on their hands as a result. And then the parents, in what world do you think it's appropriate to have conversations like this in front of your kids that then instill that same mindset in them? Like that's what's frustrating to me as well about all this stuff, is like there's this blissful ignorance to the conversation. And I see it when I post something on Instagram and whatever, and I try to like appeal to ration and say, listen, you can have your political opinions, you could have your policy opinions, but how is it that you as a human being, your feelings and your moral compass as a person doesn't supersede all of that. That's where I can't seem to wrap my brain around. And that's what frustrates me and disgusts me so much about the current political climate, is that we've allowed political opinion to be top on the list and allowed our moral compass and our morality as a human being to be somewhere in the bottom, somewhere in the middle. Like we're leading with our political affiliation rather than leading with the idea that we're human beings first. And then that trickles down into creating a whole nother generation that knows nothing except for their political ideology or their fear of the bullshit that's being spewed, like their fear that is caused by the bullshit that is being spewed at them. That leads every decision they make, including how they view and interact with other human beings. And that's so scary and downright disgusting. And sadly, these kids don't know any better. They're emulating what they hear at home, what they hear from their friends. But eventually, that's the beginning of indoctrination right there. Eventually, those same kids turn into adults with those same beliefs, who then go out into the world and are voters and potentially people with guns and whatever, right? And at this point, I don't know how anybody makes the counter argument like, oh, well, Trump's just talking. Like, it doesn't really mean anything. It does. It does. Because people follow every fucking thing he says, unfortunately. When Fox News creates their bullshit and propaganda, it's followed. When they paint every single immigrant as a fucking villain, as a criminal, as somebody committing murders and atrocities, and they repeatedly beat that information into their followers' heads, it's a problem. It matters. And this is just another, like, ridiculously sad and atrocious example of that. It's just disgusting. I'll leave it at that. With that said, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. All right, this will be relatively short. I'm kind of drained. I'm not going to lie to you after that last story. On a positive side of things here, we have to give a shout out to AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has been really on the front lines of all of this stuff, of everything happening with ICE. And she's been sharing information about Know Your Rights. And she's been at protests and rallies. And she hasn't been backing down. And she's even received some really harsh public criticism from Tom Homan, who is the quote-unquote border czar appointed by Donald Trump, the person responsible and overseeing all of these deportations. And he's been publicly attacking her. And, you know, you have to give credit, because I can imagine the amount of hate that she gets on a daily basis. Like, there are plenty of people who love her, obviously. But there are also plenty of people that are literally saying and threatening and, you know, just like talking about her in the most grotesque possible ways. And actually, there, I'm sure, is real fear of political retaliation from somebody like a Donald Trump. I mean, Homan, the border czar, has even spoken to the Justice Department allegedly about investigating her for sharing this Know Your Rights thing, saying that, you know, she's breaking some sort of rule here of her office. And I can imagine, like, it talk about, like, it's kind of like, the weight of, the cross to bear almost, right? The weight of it. I don't remember what the saying is exactly. But I'll be honest with you, like, even for me, and I'll never say never, but I've had some opportunities or discussions potentially about, like, being a bit more involved in the political space. And there's been parts of me that have felt called to it at times. But I don't want to go that far into it, I don't think that it's good for my mental health. I know it's not. It's draining to have these discussions on a regular basis, to have to, see the rebuttals. And I know it's like, oh, don't read the comments, but it's like, you can't really avoid a lot of things. And to see the rebuttal and, like, the just logic that is infuriating, and you can't help but be infuriated by it. And I've had people in, public and things like that, make comments or try to make me feel uncomfortable or whatever it is based upon, seeing some of my content. And some of it's people I've known, right? And I can only imagine that being my everyday life is exhausting and, like, depressing. I wouldn't want to leave the house at that point if I had to deal with it every fucking day. I wouldn't want to post to social media. Even I've, like, picked and choose my battles a bit with what I post on social media, because I just don't feel like dealing with everything that comes along with one post. And yeah, I try to, I know it's important, I'll suck it up and talk about it, to make sure that the message gets out there. But again, I'm picking and choosing carefully because I know what I'm inviting in. So again, that's why I give credit to somebody like AOC, who's just not backing in. I mean, she was on Latino USA, and she said, quote, "I'm not going to give them my fear." And I salute somebody who's standing strong in that and fighting for the rest of us and doing the work of the people that she was elected to represent, actually showing up, actually trying to fight, doing what she can to keep people informed. And we salute that. Shout out to AOC. And I'll leave it at that, and we'll tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusions too.
Time for conclusions soon.
All right. I mean, today was obviously a heavy episode. I think, again, my takeaway from, like, the Musk stuff and the things that he's doing, this country can't operate like a corporation. A corporation has no heart, no soul, no care for anybody except for the higher ups. And that's not what this country was founded upon. They work for us, not the other way around. And if you operate like a cold corporation, you're only operating under the incentive, under the direction of the people with the money. And a country can't successfully operate that way, or at least not one that's meant to be for the people, by the people. And that's the biggest issue with all this stuff. And again, the other thing, the fact that, again, on the surface, some of these ideas are good, but the recklessness with which they carry out their plans, or have the lack of plan they have, is what scares me. And their sort of approach of, like, hey, mistakes are going to be made, doesn't instill a lot of confidence in me, because, again, those mistakes could mean the loss of human life. And that could be your loved one that is losing their life because these people didn't actually come up with a real plan, but decided to just be bulls in a china shop, essentially. Like an unnecessary loss of life, essentially. And that leads, sadly, right into the other story about the middle school girl who took her own life. Jocelyn Rojo Carranza. Words matter. I don't know what else to say. Words matter. They trickle down into everyday life, as I've always said. And unfortunately, someone ends up being the victim of somebody just mindlessly spewing hate. And oftentimes, it's never the person spewing the hate, but unfortunately, it's just an innocent person. And I can't really think of anybody more innocent than an 11-year-old girl who's just trying to go to school every day. So God rest her soul. And I mean, obviously, my heart goes out to her family. I can only imagine. And hopefully there's some sort of justice or accountability in terms of what the school didn't do and where they fell short. That can potentially bring some sort of peace to the situation. And on a positive side of things, you know, you got to give a shout out to somebody like AOC, who is, 10 toes down, boots on the ground, doing the hard work that I'm sure is exhausting and incredibly depressing and depleting, and an uphill battle at the least. And she's still out there front lines, putting her money where her mouth is. If only the Democratic Party was made up of more people like her. I mean, shit, if only the Democratic Party did the bare minimum and rallied around her, maybe we wouldn't be in this position we are right now. But that's a conversation for another time. With that said, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Have an incredible weekend, and I'll catch you on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Till then, stay safe, and we'll talk soon. Peace.